We're going to go through a few things, also some new things which are not publicly available as of now. So I do think that we're gonna get some information out which will help each and every one of you. So to begin with, what is the actual goal of this webinar? So one thing that I would like to achieve is to get everyone, to challenge everyone's beliefs about MedTech and how MedTech works and what the important thing in MedTech is. Then, if I manage to challenge these beliefs, I would like to invite everyone to shift in perspective. I would like to present to you some data that we gathered in the AVOMID in order to get you to understand what really is driving the adoption, the clinical adoption in MedTech. And after that, I would like to offer you a guiding star through this whole complexity in healthcare. In the end, if you guys want, this is actually a setup that will get you to understand and see how we actually work inside the AVOMID. And if the ultimate goal will be, of course, to get this, whatever you see here today, to implement in your MedTech startup and MedTech company. So feel free to book, after the call, to book a free diagnostic screening call where we will actually take all that we know, all of our insights, and try to apply it specifically to your startup. And as I mentioned, if there's any questions, feel free to ask. So this is what's on the agenda today. But a question that one or the other might ask themselves is, who am I to talk about all of these topics? So allow me to introduce myself. My name is Amel Havkic. I'm actually still a practicing physician. I'm a clinical lead, and I lead a department which is specialized in long-term ventilation. I actually have multiple medical specialties, and amongst others, I do hold an MBA. I've been a MedTech advisor now for 6-7 years, working with small companies as well as international corporates. Ultimately, I developed a specific framework which helped guide the thinking from basically the blueprint, the drawing board, all the way through to clinical adoption, which is the ultimate goal of everyone creating a medical solution. And for this, we recently been awarded. One award that we won last November was Best Market Access Consultancy 25 in MedTech by MedTech World. And just a few months ago, I won a Best Rising Star of the industry, and still am very proud and thankful for everyone who helped us achieve that goal. And spoiler alert, we will be also running this November for something. So stay put, and we appreciate each and every vote that we get. So what actually is the problem? The problem in healthcare is massive complexity of the whole system, which is due to the systemic challenges and the many different stakeholders which are involved pretty much in everything that happens in healthcare. In order to get that to cut through that complexity, there's billions of investments each and every year. But still, we hear this huge amount of companies which do not manage to cut through the complexity and somehow end up failing. In fact, data shows that 75% of companies fail and never manage to deliver return on investment to their investors. This is a huge problem for the founders, for the CEOs, because ultimately what ends up happening is that it is a risk to their reputation. Getting an investment, getting funding is a big part of the game. But in the end, if you do not manage to deliver on your promises, you are under huge pressure. And even if you were to launch a new venture, it will be way more difficult to raise any capital at all. So we're talking about a risk which is real and which is relevant to each and every one of us. Um, if we look at the data of the companies which not only fail to deliver any return on investment, but don't manage to reach any measurable or meaningful scale at all, the number is way worse. It's number from McKinsey and Company, and we're talking about 90+% of MedTech startups which never achieve any meaningful scale. So what are the reasons for this? And the reasons for this, in my opinion, is something that I like to call the Silicon Valley misconceptions. What does this actually mean? In the startup scene, we have this culture, which is a lot about, which is built a lot on the success that we've seen in Silicon Valley, which means that we hear these mantras over and over again. Be too good to ignore. So develop something which is better than everything that is been there before. Funding will fix it. So if we have enough funding, we can basically buy our way through all of the adoption gaps and all of the problems that we get in along the way. One thing that I keep on hearing again and again and again is healthcare industry. And I don't like the term because healthcare is not an industry at all. What healthcare actually is healthcare is a system. It is a system which exists for one goal only, and that is to deliver healthcare to the patients. This is this is the mission that all of us are on, is ultimately to take something which is broken, fix it, find a better way of delivering it, and then getting it to the patient, to the end user. Now, that's why healthcare is not an industry, it's a system. But a system has clear rules of engagement, which are not the same rules of engagement you would find in a free market. And that's why many of these big giants, and I will come to that in just a moment, ultimately ended up failing. And the last misconception, which is not that much Silicon Valley, is that if we have regulatory approval, adoption is just down the line. And that is unfortunately not always the case, or not the case. Regulatory approval is pretty much the ticket that allows you to play. But adoption is a completely different beast. And that these are misconceptions I'm going to prove with walking you guys through the graveyard of giants. So what is happening in the graveyard of giants? Everyone knows this company, Microsoft. And Microsoft Health Vault was one of the tries of Microsoft to enter the healthcare game. They launched in 2007. The idea was to have a personal health record where all the patients and store all of their data, have all of their healthcare related data in their pockets, in their hands, at their free disposal, to send through to the clinicians, to the physicians that are treating them. The idea was to give them a possibility to govern their own data. Now they grew and grew and grew, poured more and more funding in. But what ended up happening is that they closed down in November 2019. It was a quiet shutdown. It was like a party that no one showed up. Music winded down, and they closed the program after investing roughly so data is hard to get, but likely 100 to 300 million into Microsoft Health Vault. Now, listening to this, you probably think the same thing that I think to myself. Okay, this is actually an idea which sounds very good. They have funding. They know how to create technically sound solutions. So what was the problem? Well, the problem was the same problem that Google Health ran in. And Google Health had a very similar idea. They tried to make it work twice and shut down twice. When you look at their investment, we're looking at someone of upwards of 3 billion, and their idea was to use wearables to actually create a mobile monitoring system. And they ended up acquiring for that reason, or some of those reasons, Fitbit for 2.1 billion. So the full investment was over 3 billion, but still, for whatever reason, as you can see, or we know the reasons, I'm going to come to that in a minute, but you don't see Google playing in the healthcare system as one of the top players. Another company which actually was regarded as something revolutionary, and then when I hear revolution and disruption in healthcare, my red flags already start waving. My alarm goes off, because in the end, disruption is something which is nice to see in the free market, in an open industry. But disruption in healthcare means that we break things. And we're talking about a system which is built about preventing breaking things. And that's why IBM Watson Oncology ended up closing down, because they met so much resistance by clinical practitioners. The way that IBM Watson Oncology, for those who don't know, it was a decision support system for oncological patients. The idea was to revolutionize the way that we have our tumor boards. In the end, everyone started regarding them. They got huge criticism for being unsafe and unreliable for the recommendations that they get, and ultimately for the recommendations that the system was giving out. And ultimately, they also ended up shutting down after investing nearly $4 billion into the development. Shutting down meaning they got sold off, and just after selling off, they ended up shutting down. So what's happening there? We check all of the boxes where we think, okay, this is something that has to work, but for some reason it still doesn't. And at Evomid, we took a look at 150 plus MedTech companies with similar challenges like yours, to gather some data on this adoption gap, which is obviously the reason why these companies do not manage to get sustainable success. So what does the data show? I wrote a LinkedIn post recently about this, so everyone I'm connected with might have seen this. What the data shows is that the number one reason for MedTech companies not managing to scale, to grow, and ultimately fail in returning investment to the founders, to the investors, to everyone involved, was clinical adoption. And clinical adoption sounds, so what it actually is getting the clinical users, or getting the getting the users of my solution, not the end users, because the end users would arguably be the patients. But healthcare is a B2B2C environment, which means that the end receiver of your solution is the patient, but the user, it takes a turn through the doctors. And you need to get them somehow to accept your solution as a good solution, as a viable solution, viable way of delivering the care, the everyday care to the patient. And number one reason that is not working with 41% was clinical adoption. There was another big problem, and clinical adoption mostly comes down to problems with workflow integration. Multiple sources, including McKinsey, Accenture, cite this as the number one reason. So missing workflow integration as the reason for failed clinical adoption. But I'm going to go a bit deeper in just a minute. Another point is funding readiness. So obviously, we are thinking big. We want to really change something in healthcare. And in order to achieve that, we need to have something to work with. So funding is a big part of the game. Not the ultimate goal, but it is something which is supposed to bring us where we want to be. which is building up a sustainable and scalable business. And one of the biggest problems that founders end up is to take the clinical value that their technically brilliant and functioning solutions bring and translate it somehow into a financial model which promises returns on investment. Let me put it this way. You can pretty much, with enough funding, you can build a solution which solves all the world's problems in theory. But the problem will then become of making that service a service which somehow returns the money to those, or is a viable business model and does not have economic logic gaps, which then ultimately cause the solution to fail. Another one with only 20%, which is basically marginal, gets pushed very far in the back, is regulatory alignment. The risk behind regulatory alignment is that it delays everything that you want to do after the regulatory approval. However, because many founders are aware of the regulatory needs, this is a top of mind concern, and that's why it doesn't really sabotage that many founders and is very far in the back. And only after all of these things are achieved are founders concerned about scaling any operation at all. That's where sometimes hidden growth ceilings get to show, but this is so far down the line that it is not breaking that many journeys, but the main reasons are clinical adoption and funding readiness. And there are two more very interesting numbers that we managed to get out of our data set. And that is 42% of MedTech innovators struggle with more than just one of these things. So oftentimes it's not just the clinical adoption. It's not, you have to worry as well as building a fundable business. And on top of that, you need to think about regulatory alignment. And on top of that, you need to think about having a business model which is scalable, which is already a huge challenge. And looking at this all in sequence and at all of these numbers, it is clear and just confirms what all of us have been thinking. And that is that it is an extremely complex system that we're working with, and the reasons why also big giants sometimes don't manage to get their foot in. And another one, another interesting number that we got out of the data set is that 48% of the founders could not even name specifically what their problem was. They were trying to somehow navigate the system, but they did not even, they could not even point out one specific problem that they're facing and trying to solve, but they were in what we call exploration mode. And the exploration mode means that they start thinking about their solutions to about specific problems and bottlenecks too late into the process, with the risk that is being introduced being too expensive to solve at that problem, ending up burning through their runway and ultimately crashing. And out of this data, what we managed to synthesize is pretty much 4 founder archetypes, which match extremely well what we see in everyday clinical practice, and we see in our consulting work as well. So the first type of founder is the overloaded innovator. It's a big group of 42% which struggle with multiple things at once. And their biggest risk is sequencing errors. The thing that is happening here is that they struggle with multiple simultaneous pressures, ultimately ending up tripping on a fatal mistake in the execution order of these things, ending up in complete and burning through their runway and ultimately failure. The second type of founder is the adoption stock builder. Here, think of the typical technical expert, someone who is an AI expert, an engineer, who knows how to build something, but he does not understand how the decisions and the work is actually made inside the clinic, inside real life care. And what ends up happening is that their solutions have so much workflow friction inside that they ultimately never end up adopted past the pilots. The pilot trap is one thing that I would like also to share with you guys, because in the pilots, the clinic is thinking, first of all, it doesn't cost me anything. Second of all, I have a full team behind the startup, which is guiding me through every step of this journey. So their stakes are not big. The moment that you try to convert the pilot into a paid engagement is where the clinical adoption actually hits you. So that's why it makes sense to think about those things early on. And if you would like us to help you think through those um, issues as early as possible, feel free to book the diagnostic screening call, which will pretty much kick off a diagnostic set or a diagnostic discussion with either me or one of our consultants. So the next founder archetype that we managed to identify is the fundability seeker. Think people who know how business works and are prioritizing a strong narrative and trying to raise capital very, very early in order to fund their sometimes expensive ideas. But they miss they don't realize that they're missing some very important logic in the whole system. I recently, or we recently were at a startup pitching competition where there was a doctor, a surgeon, who was pitching a specific way he wanted to approach one gap in robotic surgery. However, he could not even suggest where his solution would implement where his solution would implement, what the gaps are that needed closing, how the business model is looking. So in the end, what ended up happening is that he fell through the pitch. And possibly hurting his reputation for every next pitch that he is giving. So it's not just about hyping an idea, it's about having a good argument how this idea with funding is supposed to get translated to reality, because funding is actually a magnifier for whatever challenge you're facing, and either it will solve the challenge, or if you end up magnifying the wrong challenge, might get your startup bankrupt. And then the large group of the strategy explorers, a problem with them is that they tackle certain very important adoption questions too late. Oftentimes, this group represents early stage companies, but the problem is that they sometimes are so far into thinking into their solution that readjusting their solution is so expensive that it completely destroys their runway. So the biggest risk for strategy explorers is the latent structural risk. So here's where I would make a short pause and ask you guys, which one of these archetypes resonate the most with you? Not necessarily where you see yourself. Also, disclaimer: there is also a significant overlap between all of these. But what I would like to hear from you is which one resonates most? Which one do you see most, maybe with your peers? Um, which one is the one where you see the most friction? Feel free to just type real shortly into the chat so we can get an idea of where to double down.
Amal, I think Raheel wants to pitch in a bit. So, Raheel, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I thought we will just speak. Yeah, I'm actually, I would say I'm a overloaded and fungibility seeker because, especially in Southeast Asia, the ticket sizes are so small and there's hardly any healthcare innovative companies. There are people who call themselves healthcare. They're more like a digital connectors between doctors and patients, which is like a Tinder for doctors and patients together. There's nothing healthcare. There's no compliance or regulatory about it. So we are, I think, in the wrong market, and hence I wanted to reach out because I'm actively looking for EU expansion. And while speaking with so many people, I think the one thing which I realized is just how do you connect with distributors? How do you get regulatory feedback early? Uh, and plus, who's your distributor of your solution? How the adoption happens? You need to really think about it very early in the stage because you have to design your ecosystem accordingly. The later you find out about it, the worst, right? So I think that's one of the reasons I'm getting a lot of white hair, and funding is definitely a big problem.
Um, I think this is a good sign, to be honest, because the biggest danger, in my experience, lies with the people who are still only exploring and don't have a good idea. The ones who are overloaded means that they already exposed their idea to the real life environment and see how much there is to think about, and that's why they oftentimes feel that way. They feel lost. Um, but that is actually a good sign, which means that you're catching up with reality. Being very early stage is also no problem. You can explore, but the important thing is before any important commitment, you need to be clear about the path that you're taking. Because if not, the runway can burn down like this, and you end up with nothing at all. So it is a good sign. Let me give you this upfront. The biggest problem is with those, and today I had a discussion, or yesterday I had a discussion with a VC, no, today, which say, okay, when we have, they call it non-coachable founder. So the strategic explorer who says, no, I'm going to figure it out somehow. Please don't tell me anything. That's a big red flag for them. If they see someone who understands that there's a lot of challenges, to be fundable, you need to explain to the investor what exactly these funds are getting used for. R&D, are you going to run clinical trials? And it makes sense to get this in as early as possible. And how you can do it, I'm gonna come to that in a few minutes.
Sure.
All right. So this is actually exciting, I must say. How do I continue like this? All right. So clinical adoption is the real success metric in healthcare. Why? Because the question is, can we get sustainable business success? It's not about having a business which is inflated. It's not about just getting in evaluation or a valuation for a company. It's not just about raising money, and that is some of the Silicon Valley misconceptions that I mentioned earlier. Recently, I also said this in an interview, got released yesterday at MedTech World. But the actual success metric is clinical adoption, because this means you are out of the startup phase and you are into a mature business phase. And the thing is that clinical adoption, being so complex, feels oftentimes like it cannot be handled. But the thing is, it is predictable. And the question then becomes, how do you measure and improve your chances of getting adoption? And to answer that, just like every good doctor, I would say, well, I don't know. I don't know now, because as doctors, we don't guess. What we do is we rely on diagnostics. If you go to a doctor and he tells you right away, yeah, this is the therapy I want to give you, then run. There's a lot of doctors that I see nowadays, and nothing against longevity, but their whole business model and all of the diagnostics somehow is built up in such a way that it just points to the one solution that they want to offer, and that is a problem, because that means that they are closed down to all of these many different complexities which exist in healthcare. So if as doctors we use diagnostics, question would be, why would strategy in MedTech be any different than that? Which then brings me to the solution I mentioned earlier. This is why we actually created the STAR map, which is a research-based diagnostic and advisory tool in healthcare space. And here it is. What the STAR map actually is you can think of it as a guiding star, right? It is a constellation of factors that we know are the drivers of adoption and success in healthcare. I will. So the graph that you see here, it's pretty. I like the stars, but it's more than just a graph. What it actually is, it's a knowledge graph. It shows how certain factors are connected and how they interact to each other. And when going through all of them, what it makes possible is to get this big complexity that you are facing, the problems that you're overloaded with. And as you can see, you're not alone. All of us feel that way. But we need a way of structuring all of those things and to go through them in such a way that we can ideally guarantee, but there's no guarantees in healthcare, but that we have as high as possible of a success rate. I'm going to walk through all of them one by one real quickly. So the first factor is specialization and clinical depth. This means that your solution is focusing on a clearly defined medical problem, patient group, or clinical procedure. The idea behind it is that when you enter a hospital procurement cycle, you want to get into the MedTech space, you are looking at people who have legacy systems in place, huge systems that do a lot of things, like one of our clients, for instance, Daedalus, which pretty much, because of its size, can tackle all of the problems and all of the issues as an all-in-one solution. So the idea behind specialization and why it works is that you cannot overtake someone like that without huge funding. Look at the 300 million that Microsoft had and disappeared. But what you can do is you can open the door with laser focusing on a specific problem. And one tip I can give all of you is if you're developing a specific solution, research the clinical guidelines that the doctors use for that specific solution, so that your solution can cater the workflow that a doctor would naturally go through when trying to solve that specific clinical problem. When you're so specialized, the thing is, and it was mentioned also a minute ago, you cannot do it alone. You need to be part of a bigger ecosystem. You need to cooperate, be it for distribution or be it for integration. And this success factor measures how well you play with others, how well your solution collaborates with other solutions in order to, so technically, operationally, and strategically, in order to get invited for your seat at the table. And not having to pry open every door, because then you're fighting the system instead of living in it. For the ultimate goal, when we're looking at MedTech or healthcare, it's extremely complex, and as doctors, we're working in chaos every day. So we're thankful for every solution which helps reducing that chaos, which we can see with the predictability of services. The idea is behind predictability is how much your solution helps improving existing workflows, streamlining the flow of patients, and how well your solution manages ultimately to bring order in these chaotic everyday situations. Think of a clinician who's trying to decide something at 3 o'clock past midnight in the ICU when a patient is crashing. And everything that helps is welcome. Implementation friction goes basically through, as you saw, the constellation goes through how easy it is for any environment to accept and implement your solution into the existing processes. Is there extensive training required? And also one tip, the longer the training required for anyone to use your solution, the more the hospitals, the clinicians, the decision makers will avoid your solution. Because if I have to, we have this problem at the rollout in a clinic that I am leading right now. I'm the digitalization lead in the current hospital, is that the training required is huge, and we have big problems getting people out of their daily routines in order to be able to receive any training at all. This goes through to ambulantization and digital care, and this means moving some parts of the healthcare journey from inpatient in hospital out of the hospital. And over 85% of all MedTech leaders at this moment are targeting not only one specific point, but the whole patient care pathway. Because the idea is to catch your patient before he becomes a patient, guide him through the pre-hospital. If he needs to get the treatment, is to get the treatment in the hospital, just very short, to then have possibility of having digital care models to get him through the, let's say, recovery process after an operation from home using an AI-powered solution that he can use with his phone. So that would be little implementation friction, good predictability of services, and ambulantization of care. If we're talking healthcare, we obviously have to talk about quality of care. And what goes a long way is that your solution already very, very early, while thinking about designing your pilot programs and how they work, is to implement ways and questions. They don't have to be full clinical studies, but they should contain some information about the quality of care, patient safety, and patient outcomes. If your solution can improve a patient outcome, then we will naturally gravitate towards the solution if it also checks the other boxes. And last but not least would be economic viability. In the end, a solution needs to make economic sense for all the stakeholders involved. And sometimes this is not clear from the beginning or from the very first thought. Think of it like this. Let's say your solution prevents patients from going to the doctor. And you would think this is a very good thing, it's prevention. But reality of healthcare at the moment is that prevention doesn't get paid. The doctor gets only paid if the patient visits him. So your job, in order to cater to all of the stakeholders in the journey that your solution is touching, is to find a way to get that doctor, to make it have economic sense for that doctor who is otherwise missing on reimbursement or missing on income, have part of the cake. There needs to, let's say, it's preventing, yes, but if there is a problem, then the doctor gets to treat the patient first or very, very early. So that way you take a problem, think about it in a creative way, and add actually incentive for the doctor to use that solution. And this goes a far way. All right, so what happens when all the stars are aligned, and you can see the star map framework again here. Priorities become clear and decisions become confident. You will know what step is the most urgent. If you take a decision, you know that it will fit in this whole coherent picture. That's why I always say that alignment is more important than funding, because you could bootstrap your solution. You could sit down with a few friends and vibe code a solution, which then can already get the first revenue in. It is possible. What's not possible is having a broken system with holes in it and make it make sense. Thinking through all of these points, your business becomes fundable. Investors don't want your business to be mature and be perfect, because otherwise you don't need investors, and they are not looking at revenue growth or at growth of the value of your company. They want to come in early when they know you have things to work on, but they do want you to know what you want to work on and what do you want to spend their money on. So it's having a clear, structured plan makes your business become fundable. You gain traction and momentum because when talking to whoever you want to get your solution to, you automatically speak their language, know what they want to what they need to see, what they need to hear, and you will have the answers right there. And I've been interacting with some of you upfront, and there was a big point mentioned, and that is protecting IP. So if you have a solution which has a patent on, that's already good. But patents are limited, and patents and also other IP protection can be copied. I had recently, I was part of a big VC discussion where the question was, do VCs or investors want to invest into software-only MedTech products at all, or do they want to have at least a hardware component in it in order to be able to have that moat? So my argument in the discussion was that having a unique alignment, so what is a moat? A moat for your business is actually having a business which is hard to copy, almost impossible to copy. And that is the actual idea behind having a moat. And having a unique alignment across all of these things, you see that it's already extremely complicated and complex. But if you manage to have a unique alignment and have a unique point on many, if not all of these points, the alignment you have with your solution becomes your moat, and it is difficult to copy. No other business can do it the way you do it, and this is something that investors want and like to see. So if you if you want to look specifically, if you want one of us to look specifically into your solution, feel free to book your diagnostic screening session. We'll sit down, we'll talk through your challenges and see if it makes sense or if we can help you with your challenge specifically. And I'm quite confident that we can. So what I would like to do is I would like to present to you an example where we use the strategy, and that really was a game changer. And I'm going to use the example of the sepsis dashboard of Daedalus, which is a huge company, global corporate. But what they were facing is something that we ended up calling the paper on screen problem. When thinking digitalization, it is easy to think that it's just like a form, which was before on paper, and then it's put into a digital form, and now it's on screen. But digitalization in today's day and age is not a paper on screen. The idea behind digitalization is, so what is the difference between here, where I can put in numbers here, here, and there? I can click on some numbers. I need to punch in everything automatically. I have a drop-down menu which I need to select. What is the difference between this form and this paper form right here? Actually, there's none. It's just a paper form digitalized. When we talk about digitalization, in today's day and age, it needs to be something else. It needs to actually be something smart, something which guides the natural decision of the doctor, the natural workflow of a doctor through a specific process which feels natural to them. And this is what we ended up doing with the ended up helping Daedalus do with their smart decision support tool, the sepsis dashboard. Now, instead of just filling in, so when you imagine a huge tool, and you know it from your solutions as well, you have a lot of information, but that information doesn't necessarily communicate with each other. Looking at this specific problem, we had the labs where there's a bolted on specific lab module from, let's say, SynLab or anyone else, where the lab data is stored. Then on the other side, you have some manual inputs from nurses where the data on the patient temperature was stored. Then you have a separate module where the microbiology results are stored. And the idea behind this is to solve a clinical problem. So when you, what happened with the dashboard and how we managed to make it is to create widgets which pulls the data from the specific points. It intuitively aligns with how a clinician would make decisions. So me looking at this dashboard, with one look, I can already get together all of the data that I need for every decision, starting from, okay, what are the vitals, how are they developing over time, to what microbiology do I have, what is it resistant against, how does this look in comparison to the meds that he's already getting, what tasks do I need to perform next, and so on. So it gathers information from different sources and presents them, and this is the key, in a way which is natural for a user, for a clinician to make a decision. So what you end up happening is from having a paper on screen, a form, to having a smart decision support tool which puts every action one click away. And this is the actual power of alignment. And you can use the STARMAP framework to basically think through your solution to arrive at this point. So what gets measured gets done, and the question is, how do you measure these factors? And the idea is not to. We were doing that when we founded when I founded EvoMate, we were doing it manually, but by now we have tools for that. So and these tools make it really easy to assess this whole complex universe of interacting factors, and this is how it ends up looking. So when you go through the STARMAP assessment, you pretty much fill in your answers. It guides you through, you saw a long list of questions. In total, it's 39 questions with 3 to 5 sub-questions, in total 120 questions. The system takes the user's response, gives it a score, and gives you already a rationale on why the score is that way and what you can do to improve your score. In this case, this was my own telemedical service, which I wanted to offer. And as you can see, my response was very basic. Yeah, we have an internal champion and we try to onboard him. So the system already gives me a low score and says, like, okay, you do identify someone, so you know that something needs to happen, but you don't have a process behind it. You don't have specific details. What does that person needs to do? Does he need to be tech savvy, or does he needs to be a people person? Does he need to be a good communicator? It's unclear. Do you have a strategic approach to identifying your internal champion, or do you just ask? And with specifying those things, you improve your score. And as you can see, you walk through a diagnostic process in this, but the system is aligned in such a way that it educates you. So it gives you why it matters. It gives you reflection prompts to think through your solution really thoroughly. And what you end up getting is, on one side, the score. And we go through together to identify your dream, your goal score, and you already get a gap analysis with the system helping you understand, okay, quality of care, I have my data, I have no problem there, but my biggest gap in this is with the predictability of services. So maybe I should double down in it. In this, and we take this into account where we sit together in our cross-check session, where we then go through your assessment to discuss in detail how to use the star map for your solution specifically and to tackle your challenges. And what you end up happening is early product market fit. With saving 50 to 100K in trial and error, you end up validating your concepts extremely early, extremely fast, with a full road to the goal. You avoid losses of over 1 million per launch with getting signs of early clinical adoption, and you become a fundable company where you can go to investors and say like, okay, this is how we want to tackle our challenges, and having the right answers for every question that might come up. What we actually always do is we have the star map discovery in the beginning, where we go through the diagnosis. Based on the diagnosis, we get a treatment plan together. So we sit down, we discuss, okay, these are the challenges that we need to tackle, and this is how we do it. And if you need long-term guidance and orientation, which is invite only that we have, we also can partner long-term. So this would be pretty much your guide to navigate the healthcare space with confidence. Again, if you would like to discuss this, feel free to book a free diagnostic screening call. You can either scan the QR code. You can go on our website. We have the button right early on to the top right. Just click on that, fill in a few short questions, and we will already be able to help you a great deal. As some of you might notice, we get you to answer a few questions when downloading or when signing up to these webinars, because we can then already see, okay, these are the challenges, and we can already help you and know if we are the right ones to talk. And if not, we do have a very good network that we can introduce you to. And with this, I would open the Q&A session, and I'm looking forward to all of the feedback from you guys and to tackle all the questions that you might have.
I want to ask a question, but I saw that someone already wrote in the chat, so some questions, so I would wait for my turn then.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I love this. So let me just see. Yeah, predictive model. Also, we're talking here decision support system, using brain MRI images, standard dose, MRI, eliminating gadolinium based. Oh, so Rahil, this is great. I know that there is a lot of big companies which are doing these enhanced scans. I do think that this business model has great potential because we're going all the way to smart contrast. So we're using AI to enhance the images in order to get better predictive value out of the systems. And radiology is one of the parts where we know it's advancing in extremely high pace. So thank you for the input.
I think the problem we are solving is if somebody has a kidney function problem, you cannot get them a gadolinium-based contrast agent. And that's the reason you have to do a kidney function test before they inject with the chemical. But the next big problem is, a lot of people don't know is, Europe waters, the drinking water is contaminated with gadolinium because you guys do preventive scanning and then you use the renal function to get it out of the body, but the same water is processed. So your filtration plants are not designed to kick out this metal from water. So people who are literally not getting even tested are drinking this water. So you can just search up the level of gadolinium in Amsterdam, Berlin, Paris, where it's really, really high, and people don't know about it. So that's one. The second one is obviously the kidney function test plus the cost. Fourth is gadolinium is produced in China. So if China cuts off gadolinium production, all these pharmas cannot produce it, right? So we are non-invasive, plus we are very easy to integrate with because we rely on existing hardware where the MRI is created and we create an enhanced MRI on the fly. So nothing changes in the flow.
That sounds great. I do think that the integration will be key part, because I think a lot of vendors are trying to safeguard. So the question would be to integrate into their systems. Also, what I can say is that doctors will avoid solutions where they need to log out or log somewhere else in. And I know in practice that oftentimes there's some firewalls, technical problems with getting raw data, in your case, DICOM data, from platform A to platform B. We know this, I'm a lung specialist, and we know this, for instance, from lung volume metrics, where we need to upload a specific data sets to a specific vendor who then does the analysis and then replies it to us. So even though it's a huge vendor, I can already tell you, okay, look, this is why people are not doing it, because it could be a standard of care. I do think that you have a very good problem to solve. I have a problem at the ICU today, which would need MRI, but we cannot do it because she's on dialysis. And for those of you who don't know, if you give gadolinium to a dialyzed patient, he gets something called systemic fibrosis, which is an enforced prognosis. It's extremely bad, and people usually don't survive it. But yeah, sad story. But I do think, feel free, book a call, let's discuss.
Yeah, sure. I will share my details.
Yes, I'm looking forward. Alexandra from Barcelona, great city, great city. We're looking to go there. We recently became part of the Barcelona Health Hub. So I don't know, did you get to us through the Barcelona Health Hub, or was it the other channels?
No, it's through Barcelona.
Yeah.
No.
Looking forward to visit soon.
Yeah. Barcelona waiting for you.
Okay, so you had a question with alignment, 12 years clinical trial lead. This is great. A regulatory goals perfectly aligned, plans on further clinical adoption because they lack such reality. A clinical trial is always a curated environment. It's a lab in the end, and we know who comes in, we know who goes out, we know what we want, and if people don't fit, we exclude them from the study. So this is the real life data is something which is breaking a lot of necks at the moment. Non-issue framework aligns the product, but also actually workflows. Exactly like this. So the idea behind it is to screen all parts of the process. And the star map enables a very structured way of thinking through all of these problems. So the star map actually emerged through my research that I did on the success factors in healthcare. That's why it's so close to reality, and that's why it was able to predict a lot of developments. Because I had the benefit of hindsight. I was on one side, I was working with the developers of MedTech solutions early on, so on the sketchboard, basically. And on the other side, I was seeing the solutions who were making it. I was seeing what they did right and what they did wrong. So so alignment would be the solution to this, in my opinion. What would be necessary is to do a screening as early as possible to see. This is where it might break down the road. And if we're doing, let's say, clinical trials, by now we have a lot of reimbursements or payers, insurances, and so on, who want special clinical trials to prove that something is less expensive than what already exists in order to get reimbursement. So this is why this whole ecosystem thinking is something which is actually necessary, and which is something we can do, and we can nowadays really speed up the way in which we do it. We can do a star map analysis within one day, and you walk away with 3 months. Up to one founder said it would have saved them 2 years of just trying to find their niche and trying to get their strategy aligned. So that's something I can recommend. Hope this helps.
Thank you.
Then from my experience, best demonstrated SmartDose improves patient safety and outcomes in a way that healthcare stakeholders will trust. So third party is something which carries a lot of trust. Um, Doctors are primed through all of the pharmacy things or pharmacological things and all of the paths that we know, and there's Netflix series about it, to not trust when a company comes and says, okay, this is what you can do. So third party, let's call it the third party evaluation with data which is easy to read and easily presentable and easy to digest. It's already a lot of things which need to be easy, which is the difficult part, right? So take something which is complex and make it look easy. But the data that you generate needs to obviously include patient data, right? So it needs to be compared. So a classic study, and we have an expert here, would be a double-blind, placebo-controlled study, which is and multicentric. That's the next thing, which is a difficult thing to achieve if we're talking like a bottle, right, or an app, or something like that. So we really need to dial into other things which can point to that direction. One thing which I always say should be done very early on is to screen the existing literature to see if someone did something that we can hook on and say like, okay, look, they identified this problem, and now if we do this, this is the outcome that we can expect. Because this is, then you don't need to run your own study, but you can hook on already existing studies, and this is actually best practice in every research. And the biggest mistake is really when thinking that just being better in a specific point, or the let's say biggest is difficult to say, but the one that I see most often is that founders fall in love with their solution and think that just because they do one thing better, that everyone will magically jump and say like, okay, this is something we need, give it to us tomorrow. But the reality is workflows need to be aligned between multiple stakeholders. One of them paying for the solution, so he expects more money back. The other one wants positive ROI. The third one is trying to spend as little money as possible. The next one wants ultimate patient safety, and so on and so forth. So it is a complex web, a constellation of success factors, and actually aligning them, or the opposite of aligning them is ignoring them. And this is where I see most founders being so far in the development journey that they cannot manage to make it happen in the end. So yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, now it's my turn. So coming from both the clinical and business side, I'm curious, where do you see the biggest disconnect between how products are designed and how clinicians actually work? I mean, we know it's not about it being pretty, because a lot of products do actually look very nice. What is your view on it?
So I think it greatly becomes so we have different type of issues that can arise, and ultimately it comes down to the bias that the founders bring to the table. And the culmination of all of this research with, as I said, more than 150 companies, was indeed the industry report, which will be released during this week. In fact, what I want to do is I'm going to send you guys a link in the chat right away, so you can download it before anyone else. Just give me 1 second.
Everyone likes goodies.
Yes.
Freebies.
And then you can see the full report with more insights on what the problem is, what the typical founder trap is, and how to avoid that trap. Another spoiler alert, you heard it here first. We're working at the moment at basically self-diagnosis quiz that will be online to help founders like you identify their issues very early on, to already be able, or identify the biases very early on, in order to down the line have the least time spent in trial and error. Please guys, do me one favor. If anything doesn't work, if something is off, if you notice any mistakes in the landing page, you will get sent an email with the white paper. Let me know, because I will have to repair. As I said, it's not even like online or public yet. You guys saw it here first.
I'm testing it
Another
right now.
question in the chat.
If you guys are on a tight schedule, I'm not mad at anyone leaving.
There's another question in the chat.
Yes, I see. I'm having a lot of fun, so I'm just gonna keep on rolling. Developing a mechanical mobility aid that stops users from falling, sit to stand without physical assistance. Tackling one of the biggest issues of aging population. So we're talking something like an exoskeleton type of thing. We have
less of an exoskeleton, more of a walker that it's not as advanced as an exoskeleton. So
okay, I understand. PCT international patent, but early stage being lab validations, TRL4. While from clinical trials, I was wondering about IP protection and commercialization while having public exposure. So the thing which is difficult to imitate is being unique. So patents already give you a layer of protection, and a lot of fund givers are looking to have IP in place. But there's more to it. So when you look at the whole constellation, on each and every point of them, you can be unique, and this can be your protection. You can be early on, but you can already secure a big distribution partner, which no one with let's say unique or an exclusive distribution contract. So no one else with a similar solution would be able to sell through that distribution partner, for example. And there's on each and every point of these, there are possibilities of finding ways to get into those, to get in place a moat, a protection for the IP, making yourself so unique that you become impossible to copy. Just as an example, everyone with a ChatGPT account could basically go through the questions or go to the website and imitate something like the star map. But what they cannot imitate is all of the thank you for the feedback. All of the IP the IP is protected, of course. We have the whole methodology behind it, which is unique to us, which cannot be imitated unless it's plagiarism, because there's a process behind it, a research to come to that conclusion. There's our expertise. Unique matter expertise, which cannot be imitated. You don't have, globally looking, you don't have a lot of doctors who still practice, so know everyday problems, and as well consult MedTech companies on clinical adoption. So all of these things are unique, that add one step after the other to that unique full experience. So this is one thing that I can give. And in the end, the question that you will have to answer to yourself or for yourself is, do you maybe want to be acquired by one of these big players? Because this is one of the questions which founders need to know. Am I going to the market, or do I want someone else to go for me to the market and I get royalties, big exit, whatever? Also an important question.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much for the advice. I've taken some great notes.
Gladly. So I would conclude. We're a bit over the time, which is actually great. It was great having you all here. Knowing where to exit or what type of exit is extremely important, of course. It does not have to be an exit strategy as in sales, but at least you should know, do I want an exitable company, or do I want to run it for my own? For instance, particularly difficult is that for a consulting company like we are, the Evomed, because how do you take expertise, which is the consulting itself, and make it exitable. No, you have possibilities like, let's say, structured framework, some IP, or a business book, which, by the way, if anyone of you guys wants a copy of the book, I'm happy to send you a link as well afterwards to sign up, because I'm writing a book specifically on the success factors. Also, the founder archetypes will be mentioned there. And I'm looking forward to meet you in Barcelona, in Malta, wherever, or in Dubai, wherever we get to meet.
Awesome. Thank you so much for this session. It's been super informative.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And waiting for you in Barcelona.
Thank you so much for being here. We actually got invited to a fundraising event to Japan, but we had to decline because we're booked out for the rest of the year. But maybe sometime soon.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Amel.
Yeah, have a nice rest of the day. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. See you.
Bye.